Ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you one mistake, just one, could be the reason he lost interest? Not your looks, not your texts, not even your timing, but the moment you made him the center of your world instead of staying the center of your own. It's subtle, it's emotional, and it happens fast. And if you don't catch it, it will push him away before you even realize what went wrong. Let me show you how to stop chasing and start choosing. You meet someone, and it feels like a spark has lit up your world. You text each other non-stop. You share secrets that you haven't even told your best friends. You start imagining what it would be like to travel together, wake up next to him, maybe even introduce him to your family. And somewhere along the line, this shift happens. So quietly you don't even notice it at first. You stop being present. You stop being playful. You stop being you. Because deep down, fear creeps in. It whispers, what if he doesn't feel the same? What if I mess this up? So you overcorrect. You try harder. You send the double texts. You read too much into the silences. You start prioritizing his needs before your own. And here it is, the one crazy mistake that pushes him away fast. You make him the center of your emotional universe. It doesn't happen all at once. It starts with something small. Maybe you skip that weekend with friends to stay available just in case he wants to hang out. Maybe you don't speak up when something bothers you because you don't want to seem dramatic. You convince yourself you're being chill, being low maintenance, being easygoing. But really, you're being dishonest with yourself. Because in your effort to secure him, you start betraying the very things that made you magnetic in the first place. Your independence, your spark, your standards, that part of you that had a full, beautiful life before he ever walked into it. And the tragedy is, it's so easy to rationalize. It's just because I really like him. This is what it takes to make a relationship work. I'll just wait a little longer to see where this goes. But in doing so, you start sending out a different signal. Instead of the confident, high-value person he was initially drawn to, you become the person who's afraid to lose him. And that fear, that's what he feels. Not consciously maybe, but viscerally, emotionally. And nothing kills attraction faster than sensing that someone's afraid you'll leave them when you haven't even given them a reason to stay yet. Men are not pulled in by neediness, they're pulled in by energy. They don't fall for someone who's available 24/7, who waits by the phone, who adjusts every plan around them. They fall for the person who knows their worth, who values their time, who radiates that I'm the prize kind of energy. The one who's not trying to convince anyone to stay because they know the right person would never have to be convinced. That's the crazy part of it. How quickly the dynamic shifts when you abandon your power. He might not even know why he's losing interest. He just knows something feels off, something's missing. It's not as exciting, not as mysterious, not as compelling. And it's not because you said the wrong thing. It's not because you weren't pretty enough, funny enough, sexy enough. It's because you started orbiting his world instead of living in your own. This is not about playing games. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's not about waiting 3 hours to text back. It's about energy. And nothing says high value energy like a person who has a full plate, who shows up with joy and standards, and who knows that if this doesn't work out, they're still going to be just fine. When someone senses that you're going to be fine with eat them, ironically, that's when they start to lean in. That's when they stop taking you for granted. Because now you're not just hoping to be chosen, you're choosing yourself, and people respect that. Think about how you've shown up in the past. Be honest. Have you ever given too much too soon? Have you ever tried to fast-track the intimacy before he's even earned it? Have you ever twisted yourself into a version you thought he wanted instead of letting him meet the real you? That's the mistake. And it's not crazy because it's irrational. It's crazy because it's so common and yet so destructive. You think being extra accommodating, being extra nice, being always available will make him stay. But that's not what deepens attraction. That's what flattens it. He didn't fall for the person who molded herself around him. He fell for the version of you who had standards, boundaries, a life that didn't need him in it to feel complete. He fell for the challenge, the presence, the passion. And when you trade all that for approval, he loses the very thing he was drawn to. So what do? You stop trying to win him over. You stop chasing clarity. You stop living in your head, analyzing texts like they're ancient scrolls. You start turning the spotlight back on your own life. You start doing the things you love, not because it makes you more attractive, but because it makes you more you. You become unapologetic about your needs. If you want commitment, say so. If something he does bothers you, bring it up. If you need space to think, take it. Not from a place of anger or punishment, but from a place of self-respect. Because guess what? If he pulls away when you start honoring yourself, he was never yours to begin with. And that's not a loss. It's a gift. It's clarity. You deserve someone who's excited to be around the real you, who isn't intimidated by your standards, who steps up because they see your value, not because you convince them to. But that kind of person can only show up when you show up first, as the kind of person who doesn't need someone to complete them. That's the secret no one tells you. The minute you make someone else your emotional oxygen, they'll start gasping for space. But when you breathe life into your own world, your passions, your friendships, your goals, you become the very thing that draws people in, magnetic, radiant, whole. You stop asking, does he like me? And start asking, do I even like him? You stop obsessing over where it's going, and instead you let it reveal itself, because you're already going somewhere worth being. This one crazy mistake, making him your center, can cost you everything. But the good news, the second you realize you're doing it, you can change course, you can shift back to you, you can stop reaching and start receiving. Because love that's real, love that lasts, never requires you to lose yourself to get it. Because love that's real, love that lasts, never requires you to lose yourself to get it. And if you've already made the mistake, it's okay. You're human. We all are. You cared, you got excited, you let yourself dream a little, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. But here's the truth. Real connection doesn't thrive in desperation. It grows in desire. Mutual, organic, and chosen. Not out of fear, not out of pressure, and definitely not out of trying to prove your worth. You never have to prove that you're enough. You just have to remember that you already are. That shift in mindset changes everything. It takes you from asking, why did he lose interest? Why did I forget how valuable I am? It moves you out of the exhausting cycle of analyzing his every move and puts your attention where it belongs, back on your power, back on your life, back on the things that make you feel like you. Because when you're in your power, you don't chase, you choose. You don't wait around for someone to make you feel special. You decide you already are. You don't shape yourself around someone else's desires. You live fully and allow the right person to meet you there. There's a certain type of confidence that doesn't come from compliments or validation or being told you're amazing. It comes from watching yourself honor your own standards. From knowing that if something doesn't feel right, you walk. From having the courage to say, this isn't enough for me. Even when it hurts, even when the fantasy was beautiful, even when your heart wants so badly to hold on. That's where the real power is. And yes, sometimes he'll notice the shift. He'll feel the pullback, not as a punishment, not as a tactic, but as a natural consequence of you coming back home to yourself. He might come back. He might suddenly start giving you more attention. But here's what I need you to remember. That's not the victory. The victory isn't in his reaction. It's in your realization that you never needed him to validate your worth, that you're allowed to want more, that you can grieve what could have been and still walk forward with grace. People often say, if I just did this differently, maybe he would have stayed. But attraction isn't a math problem. It's not input A, get result B. It's energy. And sometimes the very thing that drives someone away isn't what you did. It's what you gave up. Your edge, your mystery, your identity. When you sacrifice too much of yourself too soon, you send a message. I'm scared you'll leave, so I'll bend to keep you here. But that bending, that's the start of the break. Not just the break in the connection, but the break inside you. You break away from your intuition. You break away from your standards. You break away from your authenticity. And that's the price no relationship should ever cost you. The people who stay, the ones who matter, are the ones who don't require you to shapeshift just to keep their attention. They grow with you. They celebrate your independence. They admire your backbone. They love your vulnerability, not because it makes you malleable, but because it makes you real. The biggest glow up isn't physical, it's energetic. It's that moment when you stop asking, what do I need to do to keep him? And start asking, what kind of love actually deserves me? It's the switch from people-pleasing to self-honoring, from silence to speaking up, from shrinking to take up less space, to expanding in the fullness of who you are. The irony is, the moment you step into that version of yourself, the one who isn't afraid to lose anyone, you become the very person people fight to keep. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you're already hard to forget. Your energy becomes lighter, freer, more powerful. You stop gripping so tightly. You stop begging the universe for signs. You stop bargaining with your own happiness just to secure someone else's affection. Instead, you begin to trust. Trust that what's meant for you will never require you to become less. Trust that the person who's right for you won't be scared off by your standards. Trust that losing someone who couldn't see your worth is not rejection, it's redirection. Every time you choose your value over your fear of being alone, you build something stronger than chemistry. You build self-trust. And self-trust is the foundation of every lasting relationship you'll ever have, including the one with someone else. Because here's the truth, no one tells you when you're in the middle of heartbreak. The biggest transformation doesn't happen when someone finally chooses you. It happens when you choose you, even when they don't. You become magnetic, not by begging someone to stay, but by living a life so fulfilling, so aligned, so unapologetically yours that anyone who enters it is lucky just to be invited. That's how you stop being the woman who waits by the phone and start being the woman who's too busy living to notice who's watching. Not because you're jaded, not because you've closed off your heart, but because you've finally realized you are the catch. And when you know you're the catch, everything changes. You don't settle for breadcrumbs. You don't romanticize red flags. You don't call inconsistency mystery or emotional unavailability a challenge. You call it what it is, and you move on. You don't cling to potential. You evaluate reality. You let someone earn your intimacy, your time, your heart. Because you're no longer operating from scarcity. You're not afraid of losing something that doesn't align. You're not afraid to walk away from a maybe in search of a hell yes. That's how you reclaim your energy. That's how you protect your peace. That's how you attract someone who doesn't just want to be around your light. They respect it. They see you, all of you, the strength, the softness, the fire, the flaws, and they don't try to dim you. They stand beside you, not because you begged them to, not because you became smaller to make room for them, but because you never stopped being whole. This mistake, this one crazy, very human mistake of making someone else the center of your universe, it doesn't make you weak. It makes you aware. Aware of what not to do next time. Aware of what you need to feel safe, seen, and supported. Aware of the patterns that no longer serve you. And that awareness, that's where real confidence begins. Not the kind that screams over your insecurities, but the kind that sits with them and says, even with all of this, I am still enough. The kind that allows love in without needing it to fill every gap. The kind that gives without fear and walks away without bitterness. the kind that doesn't chase, but chooses. You're not here to audition for someone's affection. You're not here to convince anyone of your worth. You're here to embody it, because the moment you stop making someone else the reason you feel lovable, you give yourself the gift of emotional freedom. And from that place, you'll never settle again. You'll look back at the version of you who gave too much too soon, and you won't feel shame. You'll feel compassion, because she was learning, she was hoping, she was just doing her best with the tools she had. But you have new tools now. You have new awareness. You have a new standard. And with that comes a new kind of love. One that doesn't demand that you disappear to be adored. One that doesn't reward self-abandonment. One that finds you at your fullest and says, yes, that's who I want. Not someone who fades into the background of someone else's life, but someone who shines so brightly in her own that only those with real vision can keep up. Not someone who fades into the background of someone else's life, but someone who shines so brightly in her own that only those with real vision can keep up. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you live that way, not for applause, not for attention, but for alignment, you stop wondering if you're too much. You stop dialing yourself down just to fit in his comfort zone. Because when you truly step into your power, the right people aren't intimidated, they're inspired. You become a mirror. You reflect back to others what they're capable of. And for some, that will be magnetic. For others, uncomfortable. But that's not your responsibility to manage. You're not here to shrink to make someone feel taller. You're not here to slow down so someone else can keep pace. You're here to evolve at your speed, at your rhythm, in your truth. The moment you stop trying to keep someone interested, you start becoming interesting again. Because you're no longer attached to the outcome. You're rooted in your identity. You're no longer acting from fear. You're moving with intention. And intention is powerful. When you show up in love from a place of clarity, peace, and self-worth, you can say no without guilt. You can say yes without anxiety. You can say goodbye without breaking and hello without clinging. You can sit across from someone and not need them to choose you because you've already made your choice to be real, to be full, to be you. That's the moment everything shifts. That's when you stop giving your energy to people who only offer potential and start creating space for those who show up with presence. Because it's never been about how much effort you put in, it's about where you put it. You can give everything to the wrong person and still feel empty. You can give very little to the right one and feel full. The difference, alignment, respect, reciprocity. You're not here to convince anyone of your value. You're here to recognize it. You're not here to become palatable. You're here to become undeniable. And that doesn't happen when you're obsessing over how to keep someone who was never fully invested. It happens when you reclaim every part of you that you gave away in the hopes of being kept. Reclaim your voice. Reclaim your standards. Reclaim your time, your boundaries, your dreams. Reclaim your Sunday mornings and your Friday nights. Reclaim your smile, your solitude, your sparkle. Because when you return to yourself, you stop being afraid of losing someone else. You stop mistaking inconsistency for passion. You stop seeing indifference as a challenge, and you start seeing clearly. You realize that real love doesn't make you question your worth. It reflects it. Real love doesn't make you wait for clarity. It brings it. Real love doesn't make you abandon yourself. It celebrates the self you fought so hard to build. And the truth is, it's not even about them. It never really was. It's about you. It's about the story you tell yourself about what you deserve. It's about the patterns you've normalized, the red flags you've excused, the breadcrumbs you've called dinner, the silences you've filled with fantasy. It's about the moments you stayed when your heart whispered, this isn't it. But here's the shift. You can rewrite the story right now. No need to wait. No need for closure, permission, or validation. You can decide that the old version of love you accepted is no longer your standard. You can decide that anything built on confusion, inconsistency, or one-sided effort is no longer welcome in your life. You can raise the bar, not out of bitterness, but out of truth. Because the moment you believe you are worthy of more, the world starts to reflect that belief back to you. You meet people who respect your time. You attract energy that matches your own. You build relationships based on mutual growth, not emotional guessing games. Because high-value energy doesn't chase, it invites, it sets the tone, it creates a vibe so grounded, so confident that anything less than intentional simply can't survive in it. But it starts with you. It starts with every decision you make when no one's watching. Every time you say no to what drains you. Every time you walk away from what confuses you. Every time you listen to the quiet voice that says, "You deserve better than this." That voice is your compass. And for too long, you may have muted it for the sake of chemistry, fantasy, or fear of being alone. But now you get to turn the volume back up. Because loneliness isn't cured by company, it's cured by connection. And connection doesn't happen when you're performing, people-pleasing, or second-guessing. It happens when you're fully present, fully honest, and fully yourself. When you stop showing up as the version of you you think they'll love, and start showing up as the version of you you love most. That's what draws in the real ones. That's what filters out the noise. Not force, not perfection, but truth. The truth of who you are when you're not trying to be chosen. The truth of why. Our need when you're not afraid to lose access to someone who never earned that kind of access in the first place. The truth of your heart when it's finally being led by wholeness instead of wounds. And yes, it takes courage. It takes breaking old patterns. It takes walking through the discomfort of not being pursued by someone who once gave you butterflies, but never gave you peace. It takes learning how to sit in the quiet of your own life and realize that it's not empty. It's expansive. It's yours. And from that space, your space, you stop asking, how do I make someone stay? And start asking, what kind of love do I want to build here? A love where you can speak your truth without fear. A love where presence means more than promises. A love that doesn't start with anxiety and end in confusion. Because when you change the question, you change the outcome. When you stop asking what you did wrong and start asking what you learned, you begin to evolve. And when you evolve, the people who aren't meant for you naturally fall away, not as a punishment, but as a clearing. A clearing for those who see you. A clearing for those who feel you. A clearing for those who want to build with you, not fix you, not tame you, not confuse you, but truly walk beside you. Not because you made yourself convenient, but because you made yourself clear. Not because you stayed small, but because you finally expanded, not because you chased them, but because you chose yourself again and again and again, until it became your default, until your value wasn't something you questioned, but something you carried, until your worth wasn't something you hoped someone else would see, but something you knew without a doubt, because that kind of energy, that kind of clarity, it doesn't just attract love, it attracts the right kind. Because that kind of energy, that kind of clarity, it doesn't just attract love, it attracts the right kind. And not just romantic love, it attracts better friendships, more fulfilling work, opportunities that align with who you actually are, not who you were trying to be to impress someone else. Because when you step fully into your truth, your life begins to reorganize around it. What no longer fits starts to fall away. What once felt good but wasn't grounded in reality begins to dissolve. And while that shedding might feel like loss, it's actually alignment making space. You've spent too much time wondering, what if I had just played it cooler? What if I hadn't said that? What if I had held back more? But let's be honest, what did holding back ever really get you? A version of love that you constantly had to maintain with silence and self-sacrifice. A connection that only existed when you ignored your needs. There is nothing cool or strong about pretending to be okay with crumbs when you deserve the whole table. It doesn't make you low maintenance. It makes you unfulfilled. It doesn't make you easy to be with. It makes you easy to overlook. And you weren't born to be overlooked. You weren't born to dim your magic so someone else could feel more comfortable in the presence of your light. You weren't born to be almost loved. You were born to take up space. You were born to speak your truth, not whisper it. You were born to be chosen by someone who chooses you back. Not out of convenience, not out of guilt, not out of habit, but out of desire. But here's the part most people miss. In order to be chosen in that way, you have to first choose yourself in that way. You have to stop being a placeholder in your own life. You have to stop being emotionally available to people who are only temporarily invested. You have to stop negotiating your value every time you feel them pulling away. Because the moment someone senses that their inconsistency makes you cling harder, they know exactly how much effort they don't need to put in. Not because they're evil, not because they're playing games, but because humans operate on signals. And if the signal is, you can show up halfway and I'll still be here, they'll believe you and they'll act accordingly. You have to show people how to treat you, not with ultimatums, but with consistency, with boundaries, with the silent, unwavering energy of someone who has already decided what is and isn't acceptable. Because standards aren't rules, they're reflections of your self-worth. They're how you teach the world that you take yourself seriously. When you don't, no one else will. And I know there's a part of you that wants to believe that if you're just more patient, more understanding, more forgiving, they'll eventually rise. That if you just keep showing how much you care, eventually it will be enough to make them stay. But love that's real isn't earned through exhaustion. It's not a reward for enduring mixed signals or endless waiting. It's not something you chase. It's something you build with someone who's actually there, fully, not just when it's easy, not just when they're lonely, not just when you're pulling all the weight. You don't create love by proving yourself. You create it by being yourself and seeing who naturally gravitates toward that. Who leans in when you speak your truth, not when you shrink to make room. Who shows up not because you begged, but because they want to. And when you start living this way, everything changes. Not overnight, not perfectly, but profoundly. You stop having the same conversations over and over with people who never change. You stop replaying every moment to find the flaw in yourself. You stop seeing their silence as something you caused. You start seeing it as information. Because every time someone ghosts you, breadcrumbs you, or strings you along, they're giving you valuable data. And instead of using that data to shame yourself, you start using it to make decisions. Decisions like, I'm no longer entertaining inconsistency. Decisions like, my time is a privilege, not a given. Decisions like, if it cost, there's me my piece, it's too expensive. This is where your power lives, in your ability to stop trying to be the exception to someone's pattern and start becoming the standard in your own life. You don't need to decode someone's emotional unavailability. You don't need to heal them into readiness. You don't need to play the muse, the therapist, or the reward for their future growth. You just need to be the example of what it looks like to love yourself enough to walk away from what drains you, of what it looks like to hold out for depth, not just attention, of what it looks like to create connection from wholeness, not from fear of being alone, because that's what changes everything. When you stop choosing from fear, you start attracting from freedom, freedom from the chase, freedom from waiting for permission to feel wanted, freedom from tying your self-esteem to someone else's validation. You become someone who inspires others to rise, not because you're trying to fix them, but because your presence demands it. Your energy says, if you want access to me, come correct. Not because you're arrogant, but because you know what it cost you to get here. The tears you cried behind texts that never came. The nights you spent justifying behavior that made you feel like an afterthought. The energy you wasted trying to force clarity out of confusion. You survived all of that, and now you get to choose differently. You get to lead with your heart and your standards. You get to be soft without being walked on. You get to give deeply without losing yourself. Because you're not afraid of losing people who don't value you. You're afraid of losing yourself again in the process of trying to be enough for them. That's the difference now. You don't just want love. You want love that's built on truth, not performance. You want connection that's rooted in mutuality, not strategy. You want peace more than you want a text back. And that's powerful, because when peace becomes your new normal, chaos becomes unattractive. When clarity becomes your baseline, confusion becomes unacceptable. When self-respect becomes your compass, you don't even entertain what once broke you. You outgrow the old you, the one who waited, who wondered, who worked overtime just to be seen. You become someone who no longer needs to be pursued to feel worthy, because now you're aligned, not perfect, not emotionless, but grounded in something real, yourself. And in that grounded place, you make better choices. Not because love suddenly becomes easy, but because you do. You become easy to be with, not because you say yes to everything, but because you know what you're about. You become magnetic, not because you're trying to prove something, but because you've stopped trying entirely. You're just living, you're just loving, you're just being fully, freely, and without apology. And the ones who are meant for you, they'll feel it, and they'll rise to meet you there.